Fans lost control. Prague football final turns violent as fans storm pitch and allegedly attack rival goalkeeper. A dramatic title deciding football clash in Prague ended in chaos on Saturday night after hundreds of supporters stormed the pitch, forcing officials to abandon the match amid shocking scenes of violence and disorder. Now we take a deeper look and break down this entire story on the AI podcast.
So I want you to imagine throwing the absolute ultimate celebration party. Like you spent all year planning it, right?
Right.
All your friends are there, the music is perfect, and right at the crescendo of the night, like right when you're about to pop the champagne, your guests get so completely out of hand that they accidentally burn your house down.
Yeah, right down to the ground.
Exactly. And that is the paradox we are looking at today. Welcome to today's deep dive, by the way.
Thanks for having me. It's a crazy topic.
It really is. We are unpacking a situation in Prague that just defies everything we thought we knew about crowd psychology, victory celebrations, and honestly, self-sabotage.
Yeah, it's a staggering scenario because it totally flips the conventional script of sports upside down.
Right.
Like today, we're analyzing a highly anticipated title-deciding showdown in the Czech First Division. You got these two incredibly fierce city rivals, right? Slavia Prague and Sparta Prague.
Which is always intense.
Oh, absolutely. These are clubs that share a city, they share a history, and their fan bases basically live side by side in this state of perpetual year-round tension.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how a moment of just pure ultimate sporting triumph mutated into this dangerous, completely uncontrolled chaos.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
We're going to look at the timeline of the violence, the psychology of the fans who instigated it, the specific physical toll it took on the actual players, and what a massive systemic breakdown like this means for the future of high-stakes rivalries.
Because honestly, the events on the pitch look less like a football match and more like a tactical security failure.
Totally. So let's set the stage.
Right, so the setting is everything here. We are at the Eden Arena. Slavia Prague is the home side. They're playing Sparta Prague, and Slavia is actually leading 3-2.
Which is a super tight margin.
Very tight. And this isn't just any regular season game. It is a title-deciding match. Slavia is on the absolute cusp of being crowned league champions right there on their home turf in front of tens of thousands of their own supporters.
I mean, you really cannot overstate the emotional temperature of a stadium in that specific scenario. A 3-2 scoreline means the tension has just been stretched to its absolute limit for the entire match.
Oh, yeah. Every single tackle, every pass, every referee decision, it all feels like life or death to these fans.
And then we reach the 97th minute.
Right. The 7th minute of stoppage time. So the players on the bench are standing and the fans are screaming. I mean, they are mere seconds away from the final whistle. The trophy is essentially in their hands.
And this is where the entire narrative just completely fractures, because suddenly large groups of Slavia supporters just invade the pitch.
Yeah.
But they aren't just running out to hug the players or sing songs. They are carrying burning flares.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, flares fundamentally change the physical and psychological environment of a stadium. Well, the moment a flare goes off, you have this blinding, unnatural red light. You have intense heat and this overwhelming, acrid smell of sulfur.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sulfur smell is intense.
Exactly. And thick smoke immediately fills the bowl of the stadium. So within seconds, you transition from this brightly lit, highly regulated sporting environment into a completely chaotic, low visibility zone.
Which has to be so disorienting.
It is. It instantly triggers a primal fight or flight response for anyone who isn't holding the flare.
And the invading fans, they use that chaos, right? Like, they don't just stay on the pitch to celebrate. They actively begin throwing those flares and other objects toward the away section.
Right, the stands specifically holding the Sparta supporters.
Which is just wild. Meanwhile, players from both teams are forced to sprint toward the tunnel in an absolute panic because the stadium security has completely collapsed.
It just evaporated.
But wait, put yourself in the shoes of a fan in that stadium for a second. It is the 97th minute. You are winning. Usually, it's the losing fans who riot, right? Out of anger or frustration. Why on earth would the psychology of a crowd drive them to attack their rivals and like literally throw fire rather than just waiting 10 more seconds to celebrate their own team's championship?
It makes no sense on the surface.
Right. Why self-sabotage like that?
Well, to understand that, you really have to look at the culture of ultras in European football.
Okay, the ultras.
Yeah. Ultras are not your everyday fans who just buy a ticket and a hot dog. They are highly organized, incredibly fanatical support groups. They have their own hierarchies, their own subcultures, and, their own codes of conduct.
Wow. Okay.
So for a certain extreme subset of these supporters, the victory on the scoreboard is honestly only half the battle.
So the trophy itself just isn't enough for them?
Not in a city derby. No way. In these hyper-intense rivalries, the ultimate goal is total humiliation and territorial dominance.
I see.
The mindset is like, this is our city, this is our stadium, we have beaten you on the grass, and now we are going to physically drive you out of our space.
That is so aggressive.
It is. And the adrenaline combined with the mob mentality, it just completely hijacks the actual celebration.
And the smoke from those flares, that plays a huge role in the mob mentality too, right?
Absolutely. It triggers this psychological phenomenon called de-individuation.
De-individuation.
Yeah. Basically, when you are in a crowd of thousands and thick smoke rolls in, your individual identity vanishes. You are no longer a bank teller or mechanic or a teacher. You are just a faceless part of the mob.
Right, you blend into the chaos.
Exactly. The psychological burden of personal consequence just evaporates. You feel invisible, which makes you feel invincible. So they act purely on aggressive impulse, totally divorced from the actual rules of the sport they claim to love.
It is exactly like lighting fireworks in the living room. You destroy the very thing you were there to celebrate.
Perfectly said.
But the destruction here wasn't just symbolic, it crossed a massive physical line.
It really did. And that brings us to the logistics of stadium security and why it failed so spectacularly in this instance.
Yeah, because I always think of a sports pitch like a theatrical stage. Like, there is this unwritten, invisible social contract between the audience and the performers.
Right.
The fans can scream, they can cheer, they can boo, but they never cross the footlights. The players are in their domain, and the fans are in theirs.
Exactly.
And when fans shatter that boundary and actually lay hands on the performers, the players in this case, it stops being a sporting event and instantly becomes a crime scene.
That is exactly what happens. Because that invisible barrier is quite literally the only thing that allows professional sports to function.
Because of the numbers.
Yeah, look at the mathematics of a football stadium. You have 30 to 40,000 people surrounding 22 players. The security personnel are always vastly outnumbered.
Right, there's no way they could physically stop everyone.
No, a line of stewards in high-visibility jackets standing around the perimeter is a psychological deterrent, not a physical wall.
They're just there to remind people of the rules, basically not to physically wrestle a mob.
Precisely. You might have one steward every 10 yards. So when 500 coordinated people decide to move forward at the exact same time, the physics just take over.
The line breaks instantly.
Yeah. The whole system relies entirely on the vast majority of people honoring that social contract. Once the psychological barrier is breached by the first 10 people, the rest just flood in behind them.
Well, that contract was violently broken in Prague. The reporting details this terrifying experience of the Sparta Prague goalkeeper, Jakub Surabček.
Yeah, that was awful.
During this pitch invasion, amidst all the thick smoke, Surabček actually collapsed onto the pitch. And he later came out and stated that he was physically attacked by an invading supporter.
Which is just horrifying. But we really have to consider the physical geography of a football pitch to understand how vulnerable he was in that moment.
Because he's so isolated.
Exactly. The goalkeeper is the most isolated player on the field. They're often 50 yards away from their closest teammate, but they're standing mere yards away from the stands.
And usually the stands where the most hostile vocal fans are placed, right?
Spot on. So when the perimeter breaks, the goalkeeper is instantly surrounded before anyone else can even reach them to help.
That is so scary. Surabček actually posted about this on Instagram, and his phrasing is honestly chilling.
What did he say?
He wrote, quote, "To have someone run up to me during the match, threaten me to my face, and attack me is absolutely unacceptable. I will pursue this legally," end quote.
Wow.
I think the phrase "threaten me to my face" is what makes it so disturbing to me.
Yeah, it makes it incredibly personal.
Right. This wasn't just a random collision in a chaotic crowd. This was a targeted, face-to-face act of aggression against a young man who was just, doing his job at his workplace.
It really shatters that illusion that athletes are these untouchable figures. And Surabček wasn't the only casualty, sadly.
Really? There were others.
Yeah, local media reports indicate that another Sparta player, Matias Vosta, and even a member of the club's medical staff were allegedly assaulted during the invasion.
Oh my God. The fact that medical staff were targeted really highlights the indiscriminate nature of the mob.
Exactly. The mob isn't pausing to read the job title on the back of a jacket. Yep.
Right, they just see the colors.
Yep. The de-individuation we talked about earlier means all nuance is entirely lost. Anyone wearing the rival colors, whether they're a star striker, a backup goalie, or a physiotherapist carrying a medical bag, is suddenly a target.
That is terrifying.
It is. And at that exact moment, the governing authorities and the law enforcement agencies present are no longer managing a football match. They are managing a mass casualty threat environment with multiple ongoing assaults.
Yeah, because once you have medical staff being assaulted and a stadium completely choked with sulfur smoke, the referees are totally out of options.
They really are.
They can't just blow the whistle, clear the pitch, and say, hey, let's restart the clock for the final few seconds.
Not a chance. The administrative machinery behind the scenes shifts gears entirely at that point.
So what happens? Who makes the call?
Well, the first most immediate action falls to the referees on the grass. They immediately suspend the match. They pull the players off the field as riot police and specialized security forces finally manage to enter the arena in sufficient numbers to establish a perimeter.
And there is this fascinating sociological dynamic happening in the stands while this evacuation is taking place.
Oh, the reaction of the other fans.
Yeah, because a fan base is not a monolith, right? While the invasion was happening, the regular fans, like the tens of thousands of people who had stayed in their seats, who brought their kids, who just wanted to watch their team lift a trophy, they started furiously chanting against the pitch invaders.
That internal civil war is such a crucial distinction to make.
It really is.
Because it is incredibly easy for the media or rival fans to just paint an entire stadium with one brush when violence erupts.
Oh, for sure.
But the reality is that the vast majority of the people in the Eden Arena were furious. I mean, they were sitting there watching their team's historic achievement being actively destroyed by a tiny percentage of their own support base.
The frustration must have been suffocating for them. Like, you invest your time, your money, your emotions all season long. You are up 3-2 against your biggest rivals.
Yeah.
You are literally minutes away from glory, and suddenly you find yourself screaming in anger at the guy wearing the exact same jersey as you because he is ruining everything.
It's tragic, really. But despite the anger of those legitimate fans, the officials huddled down in the tunnels had a very grim reality to face. This wasn't a conversation about resuming play anymore.
Right. There were intensive emergency discussions happening between the match officials, the police commanders, and the safety officers.
And they had to make a tough call.
They did. And ultimately, they made the only call they could logically make under the law. The game was officially abandoned. They called it off entirely. The Sparta Prague squad had to be evacuated from the stadium under heavy police protection.
You know, abandoning a match in the 97th minute is incredibly rare in modern football.
Is it? I would imagine so, being that close to the end.
Oh, absolutely. Usually, officials will do everything in their power to finish a game, even if it means pausing for an hour to clear the stands, because abandoning a match creates this massive bureaucratic nightmare.
That makes sense.
But once players have been physically assaulted on the grass, the sporting integrity of the match is just permanently compromised. You cannot look athletes in the eye who've just been attacked by a mob and tell them to go back out and play out the clock.
No, definitely not.
The primary mandate shifts entirely from sporting regulations to the legal duty of care and safe extraction.
Which brings us to the institutional fallout, which is massive here. Slavia Prague's chairman, Jaroslav Turdik, he actually issued a very public apology for the actions of his own supporters.
What did he say?
He said, and I quote, "I'm truly sorry because I believed we would celebrate the title together, but things turned out differently after 2 Sparta players were physically attacked. The officials, police, and security forces decided the match could not continue." End quote.
Wow. You can really hear the profound institutional defeat in that statement.
You really can.
Because he recognizes that the historical narrative of the season has been permanently rewritten. They are no longer the brilliant squad that outplayed their rivals to win a championship.
Right.
They're the club that failed to protect human beings in their own stadium.
Yeah.
And that carries crushing regulatory weight.
And the regulatory bodies do not take this lightly at all. Slavia Prague is now facing unprecedented punishment from the Czech football authorities.
As they should be, honestly.
We are talking about severe financial fines. We are talking about stadium sanctions, which usually means forcing the club to play future home games behind closed doors, locked out from their own fans entirely.
Which hurts the fans who didn't even riot.
Exactly. But the mechanism that is most striking to me is the looming threat of points-related penalties.
Oh, yeah. Points deductions are basically the nuclear option in league football. And they are used for a very specific reason.
Because fines don't work.
Exactly. Fines just do not change behavior at the elite level of the sport. If a governing body issues a €100,000 fine to a multi-million euro club, the club simply treats it as an operational expense.
Right. It's just the cost of doing business.
Precisely. They pay it, issue a PR apology, and move on. Even closing the stadium for a few games, while financially damaging through lost ticket sales, leaves the team's competitive standing totally intact. But points are the absolute currency of the sport.
Right. If you take away points, you strike at the very reason the club exists in the first place. You alter the league table.
Yes. And that is where the bitter, staggering irony of this entire event really crystallizes.
How so?
Governing bodies use point deductions because it is literally the only language that these hyper-competitive fan bases truly understand. So by storming the pitch with flares to aggressively celebrate winning a title, these extreme fans might actually trigger an administrative points deduction that literally strips their team of the very championship they thought they had just won.
Wow. That is unbelievable. But the administrative dilemma there is incredibly complex too, right?
Oh, incredibly.
Because think about the players. You have a squad of athletes who trained all year, played a brilliant season, and executed their game plan perfectly. They were leading 3-2.
Yeah, they did their job.
Is it right to punish the athletes for the criminal actions of a few hundred people in the stands?
It feels deeply unjust to the athletes on the pitch, I agree. They did everything perfectly. But from a broader institutional standpoint, the football club is a single entity responsible for the safety of its stadium.
So they have to be held accountable as a whole.
Right. If the league authorities do not lay down the harshest possible sanction for a massive security failure that resulted in physical assaults, they set a catastrophic precedent.
That makes total sense.
They have to unequivocally prove that ensuring human safety is more important than determining who wins the league. So the ultimate consequence of this riot is that the fans who wanted to humiliate their rivals may have single-handedly handed them the championship on a silver platter.
It is just a dizzying sequence of events to try and comprehend, to pull all these threads together. We have this massive title decider in Prague. Slavia is leading Sparta 3-2.
Right.
We hit the 97th minute, the final moments of stoppage time, and a massive pitch invasion by the home team's own ultras completely shatters the event. The introduction of flares triggers panic and de-individuation, turning fans into a literal mob.
Yep.
We see the collapse of stadium security, and tragically, we see the targeted physical assault of opposition players and medical staff, which forces the police and referees to completely abandon the match, leaving the supposed victors facing potentially devastating league penalties that could erase their entire season's work.
It's a tragedy of their own making. And if we step back to look at the macro picture, the shockwaves of this incident are reverberating way beyond the borders of the Czech Republic.
Oh, I'm sure everyone is watching this.
Yeah, this event has deeply unsettled football administrators all across Europe. It has violently reignited these ongoing, really anxious conversations of modern crowd control.
Because it shows how vulnerable they are.
Exactly. It forces leagues to ask whether current stadium security protocols, which, as we discussed, rely so heavily on the good behavior of the crowd, are remotely adequate for high-risk, emotionally charged rivalry matches in the modern era.
It just proves that the architecture of safety we rely on to enjoy these massive cultural events is incredibly fragile.
Extremely fragile.
Like, the illusion of control can be shattered by just a few hundred people deciding they no longer care about the rules. It only takes one spark, or in this case, one flare, to collapse the entire system.
And the institutions are often left scrambling because their contingency plans are built for minor disruptions, right?
Yeah.
Not a full-scale abandonment of the social contract.
Which leaves us with a final lingering thought. Something the regulatory bodies are going to have to wrestle with, and something I want you to mull over as you go about your day.
It's a big question.
It really is. The game was officially abandoned, despite Slavia leading 3-2 with just seconds remaining on the clock. If a team is legitimately winning on the pitch, but their own fans cause a match to be abandoned due to violent criminal behavior, how should a sports league mathematically determine the official result?
That's the million-dollar question.
If a league awards a forfeit victory to the away team because of a riot, do the reckless actions of a mob in the stands suddenly have the power to entirely erase a sporting reality that the athletes built with their own sweat?
It is a profound dilemma that challenges the very foundation of how we define a victory.
You throw the perfect party, the champagne is ready, and your guests burn the house down. Now the authorities have to decide if the party ever really happened at all. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.
Okay, one question for you. How did the title winning football celebration in Prague suddenly spiral into violent chaos? And should clubs face harsher punishments when fans invade the pitch and allegedly attack rival players during crucial matches? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.